All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe for all of our updates. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. The link is in the comments below. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. An artist gets a new job designing logos for big companies. The first day on the job, the artist's boss asks them to create a logo from scratch just for probing purposes. What is the reason probing is used in this scenario? Pretty straightforward question, right? Because as long as we're fluent and we know what probing is, we can answer this question fairly easily. So, what do we know? We know an artist got a job designing logos, and the first day on that job, the artist boss says, create a logo from scratch for probing purposes. Now, why do we probe? We probe because we want to see the current level of a skill or a behavior before any teaching has occurred. Now, you might say, well, that sounds like baseline. And more or less, you're right. I mean, when we take baseline, we're actually taking data, it's systematic. Probing can be a lot more fluent, where we're just simply asking somebody to do something and seeing if they can do it. So, by asking this artist to create a logo from scratch, the boss is going to get a pretty good idea of the artist's skill level. And that's the whole idea behind probing. So, what is the reason? A, probing will help identify the artist's current skill level. Perfect. A is what we predicted. A looks like the right answer. We always read all of the answer choices. We don't get lazy. B, probing will help identify the function of the behavior. Probing is not going to identify our function. It's going to give us more information, but it's not going to tell us the function. C, probing will help identify potential reinforcement for the artist. Probing, in this case, will not. If you're probing preferences, maybe, but we're not doing that. We're probing skills. And then probing will provide reinforcement for the artist. Probing is the antecedent to the artist creating the logo. It is not the consequence. So the reason probing is used is A. Probing will help identify the artist's current skill level. A 7-year-old client will spin in circles repeatedly when excited. This often happens when handed a tangible. What is the most appropriate first step in addressing the behavior? All right, pretty simple question on the surface, but it requires a little analytic thought, and we have to slow down and make sure we're answering the question. The question is, what is the most appropriate first step in addressing the behavior? So we know so far, 7-year-old spins in circles when excited and often when handed a tangible. That's all we know. We're not saying the function is anything. We're not saying anything about the behavior. It's just simply a description of what happens. And so following a description of what happens, what do we need to do to address the behavior? What is the first thing we want to do? A, block the spinning response when a tangible is given to the client. Well, all we know is they spin when excited and when given a tangible. We don't know if we need to block the spinning response. We don't know why it's occurring. We don't know anything more than what the information here is given. So A is a pretty big leap ahead. B, a functional behavior assessment should be conducted for the spinning behavior. Absolutely. The only information we have is that the client spins in circles when handed a tangible. We need to know more information before we design an intervention. And even if we need to design an intervention, maybe it's not a big deal, right? Maybe it's not interfering with the client's life. A functional behavior assessment should be the first step when addressing behaviors. C, reinforce the client in the absence of spinning in circles. Again, we're not there yet. We don't know enough about the behavior. And then D, teach the client a way to communicate that they are excited when receiving a tangible. Potentially, but we need to first identify, why is the behavior for sure happening? Is it even an issue? Does it need to be addressed? And how should we address it? So before we can do anything by reinforcing or functional communication or response blocking, we should conduct a functional behavior assessment, and that goes for all behaviors. All behaviors before being addressed should receive a functional behavior assessment. Evaluate the following number of responses that were recorded using a partial interval recording measurement system. The number of responses recorded was 4 based on the following data using 5-second intervals. 0 second, 1 second, 5 seconds, 0 second, 0 second, 2 second, 5 second, 0 second. What would you change about the number of responses? We have a little data analysis question. Not too bad if we know our terminology. Fluency, again, very important. Question is asking, what would you change about the number of responses? Now, what do we know so far? We know we're using a partial interval recording measurement system. That means we are recording behavior in intervals, and if the behavior happens at any point, it's a response. Now, we know that 4 responses were recorded, and we're using 5-second intervals. So let's look at our data. 0 seconds for first interval. Behavior didn't happen, no responses. 1 second and 5 seconds. Behavior happened, so that's 2 responses. 0, 0, no responses. 2, 5, that's 2 more responses, and 0. So we recorded 4 responses. We used partial interval. Would we change anything about the number of responses? A, the data should only include responses that lasted the entire 5 seconds. A would represent what measurement? That would be whole interval. We're using partial. And when partial, as long as it happens at all during the interval, we count it. B, the data should only include the 0-second data points. We should not include 0-second data points in partial interval because that means the behavior did not happen. C, the data looks correct based on this information and no changes are needed. Yes, we have 4 responses. We have 4 responses in our data. Everything looks fine. Doesn't seem like any changes are needed. Bruce likes to cook for himself at home, but will often leave out all the ingredients and make a giant mess in the kitchen. This irritates his parents, who like a clean house. Which of the following strategies could not be an option for reducing Bruce's behavior? Don't overthink this question. What is the question asking about? It's asking about a strategy that could not reduce Bruce's behavior. So it's a not question, right? And with the not question, we're typically looking for 3 answers that could do something and 1 that couldn't. In this case, we're looking for an option that could not reduce behavior. We know Bruce likes to cook for himself at home, leaving out all the ingredients, makes a giant mess, irritates his parents. It's not really important here, right? Because we're looking at strategy, and a strategy that is not an option for a reduction. A, positive punishment. Is positive punishment a reduction strategy? It is. That's all we need to know for this question. Don't evaluate the merits of positive punishment. That isn't what the question is asking. The question is simply asking what strategy could or could not work. Positive punishment could be an option to reduce. B, negative reinforcement. Would we ever use reinforcement to reduce behavior? No. Reinforcement does not reduce behavior. It only increases behavior. Negative reinforcement would never be an option to reduce a behavior. And then extinction. Is extinction an option? Absolutely. Extinction and punishment are 2 options for behavior reduction. And so if we're looking at the following strategies, the only option that would not reduce Bruce's behavior or could not be an option to reduce Bruce's behavior is going to be B, negative reinforcement. Not a difficult question, but you've got to think a little bit and slow down. As you can see, most of these questions involve 2 things. You have to be fluent. If you're fluent, a lot of these become very simple. And 2, you have to answer what the question is asking. You do those 2 things and you will be successful. There are several possible behaviors that are candidates for extinction. Which of the following behaviors, based on the information given, would be the most vulnerable to extinction? Let's think about this question. Okay, so which of the following behaviors, based on the information, would be the most vulnerable to extinction? And what do we mean by vulnerable to extinction? Well, when we put a behavior on extinction, we're withholding reinforcement that was previously given. And so if you think about it logically, a behavior that has received more reinforcement or reinforcement for a longer amount of time is more likely going to be resistant to extinction. And so behaviors that are vulnerable to extinction typically receive less reinforcement or have received reinforcement for a less amount of time. So let's look at A. A 10-year-old says nanner instead of banana and has all his life. So for 10 years, this 10-year-old has engaged in this behavior and received reinforcement. That behavior is not very vulnerable to extinction given the history. It's been 10 years. B, yesterday you ate at the same place you've eaten lunch at, for the last 2 months. So you've eaten at this place for 2 months, not as long as 10 years, but still longer. But B is a better option than A. C, when Dave is nervous, he will bite his nails. This started almost 3 years ago. C, not as vulnerable as B. And then D, only last week did Anna start to cry whenever her grandparents left their house. All 4 of these scenarios involve a time. And when it's just the time component, based on our information, D is going to be our answer because it's only been a week that Anna's been engaging in this behavior and potentially receiving reinforcement. Now, there are many more variables that might affect extinction, but what are we doing? We're answering the question given, and the question says use the information. And the information we have is the amount of time these behaviors have been happening. And that's all we know. So the one that's going to be most vulnerable to extinction is the one that's been happening the shortest. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Check out btexamreview.com, share with your friends, subscribe. Let us know when you pass so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.